So, to get into the nuts and bolts of how to administer and score the ORF assessment, um, here are the directions, and these are also in the materials that I showed you, that PDF in the previous video. So, you literally just say these words. I'd like you to read a story to me. Please do your best reading. If you do not know a word, I'll read the word for you. Keep reading until I say stop. Be ready to tell me about the story when you finish. And that prompt is important even if you are not doing the retell fluency, which we're not, because you want them to read and think about the meaning. So at the end, have them tell you something about the story or ask them a question about it, just to kind of keep them focused on meaning. When you're going to begin testing, you say, put your finger under the first word, and you can point to the first word of the passage. It's not the first word of the title, the first word of the passage. And you just say, ready, begin. You're not going to start your stopwatch or your timer on your phone until the student gets going. So first, you're not going to read the title to the student. They can read the title, but don't start the stopwatch yet because those words won't count. And you're going to wait to start the stopwatch until they read the first word of the passage. So let's say the first word was really hard. You wait for 3 seconds, and then you just tell them the word. Anytime they've waited for 3 seconds, they haven't gotten it, you just tell them the word. And so once you've told the word, if they've missed that first one, then you start the stopwatch. So you're getting them started when they're like really ready to go. For the most part, they'll get the first word correct. So you just start it as soon as they say that first word correctly. Don't make any errors the student makes or don't correct any errors they make while they're reading the title. Don't correct errors at all. Unless, if they don't know, if they just say, I don't know, or they pause for 3 seconds, you can tell them, but don't stop them to correct them if they read something incorrectly. Remember, our purpose in this little 3 minutes is not to teach, it's to take the temperature of where they are. So it's okay to let them make errors here because that's going to coach you and let you know where does this student need support. If you make it easier for them or help them with the answers, then you're sort of messing yourself up and your ability to help them. Be discreet about the stopwatch. Timing kids a lot definitely gives an impression about what we value in reading. So, you can even say, like, this is not the most important thing about reading. It's just, a little way for me to kind of get a temperature. Okay, we've done this one. If you are with a student who is kind of reading well below their grade level benchmark, they might not be able to read 10 or more words correctly in the first passage. And if that happens, you don't need to administer the remaining passages. And when you get, and same thing, if you got to the second one and they could only read 10 words, that's fine. You can stop there. Now read this story to me. Please do your best reading. Ready, begin. So that's all you really need to say on the second and third passages. And you can keep it pretty snappy from one to the next. This shouldn't take more than, 5 or 6 minutes overall. You won't have a scoring booklet. You'll have just a printed out version of the teacher materials. All the marking that you have to do is to just mark through words that they either skip, say incorrectly, or ask you for, or that you have to tell them because they hesitated for more than 3 seconds. If they add a word, you don't mark it incorrect. If you are able to write down what they said when they got a word incorrect, like they said pot instead of pet. If you write down pot, that will help you later. If you're able to jot notes about their prosody, their expression, that will help you later. But the requirement is just to get those marks down if they have an error. At the end of 1 minute, you just place a little bracket in the text on your paper after the last word that they said, and you say stop. If you were doing retell fluency, you definitely want to remove the passage so they're not looking back at it. since we're not doing that, I don't really care if you remove it while you're talking about the passage for a moment. But that's why that's there. And then, and if they're in the middle of a sentence at the end of a minute, you can let them finish, but only count the words that they actually read in a minute, because that's what you're trying to track. Okay. So when you look back at their score, you're counting the number of words they read correctly. So when you count it up, all the words read correctly will be blank, like you won't have any marks on them, and the slashes will go through the errors. As I said, you can stop and not administer subsequent passages if they read 10 or fewer words, or fewer than 10 words correctly on a passage. Also, if you're sitting there and the student has gotten 0 words correctly in the first line of the passage, then you can discontinue at that point. That's okay. Let's see. If the student pauses and they just seem to have lost track, or just kind of gotten away from the reading, you can just say keep going as often as you need to. Also, as we've talked about, if a student pronounces a word in a way that you wouldn't think of as general American English, if they pronounce it that way in their speech and also in their reading, that's correct. Like axe, if I always say axe instead of ask, then axe would be the correct pronunciation of ASK in the text. Okay. So here, this is the PDF that we saw earlier, and I'm going to scroll up to page 94. Here's just a few examples. So here, we again leave blank words they read correctly. We don't count anything for inserted words, and they have to say the word as a whole word. So they can sound it out, but they have to say it as a whole word. So, okay, here the student read, "It was hot at the beach." And they stopped here. That's the bracket. So that's 6 total words. There's no errors marked, so we don't subtract any errors. So the words correct is 6. Here, the student sounds out beach, but each, but then they said beach. So again, that's 6 correct. If they didn't say beach here, if they just had beach, I would mark that incorrect because they haven't said the word as a whole word. Here, they added "and sunny," and we just ignore that. You could jot it up at the top above it if you want to, but I think probably the reason that we don't score this is that statistically it's probably comparatively rare, and it's probably very difficult to get scorers to score it consistently the same way every time. So in their large scale studies of the assessment, they found that it was more reliable if you just ignore those added words. Here, if you repeat phrases, like reread it, then you can just ignore those. So if they said "it was hot at the beach," then you can just score that as all correct. If they self-correct, so he says or she says, or they say, "It was hot at the beach," or "it was hot at the bank," I mean beach. That SC stands for self-correct here. And that's made correct. So I don't count that slash as an error. Again, 6 words correct. Here, the student is reading a proper noun with correct pronunciation or a reasonable phonetic pronunciation. The student isn't familiar with Dubai, so they read, it was hot at the beach in Dubai. That's a reasonable pronunciation. If they said it was hot at the beach in Qatar, from this text, I would mark it wrong because there isn't a connection between the print and what they've said. Okay. Here we're seeing you just scoring more words. They read across these 2 lines, and it's showing you how these numbers on the side help you count. Abbreviations should be read the way they're pronounced in conversation. kind of what you'd expect. So here they said it is hot at the beach instead of it was. So that was an error. So they read 6 words here because this is the bracket that stops. And then here, one error, which is this one slash. This is the example I mentioned above. They said, but each, but they didn't say the whole word together. Here, the student has said barn twice instead of beach. If they read it incorrectly multiple times in the passage, it counts as an error each time. And that's worth knowing because sometimes assessments have different rules for that. Here, this is an omission. The student forgot to say hot or didn't see hot. It was at the beach. That's an error. Here, if they skip an entire row of text, you can draw a line through the entire row and count all of those omitted words as errors. And that's another thing that's not the case in every assessment, but that's the pattern for this one. So we just follow it so that the scores we get make sense in comparison to the scores that we have as benchmarks. It was high at the beach, so this is a substitution. And that's an error, so we only have 5 correct here. It was hot at the B. And if it's been 3 seconds, you go ahead and just say beach and let them go on. You mark that incorrect because they didn't come up with the word. Here, the word is pronounced incorrectly given the context. So dove is a pronunciation for D-O-V-E. That's how they're showing dove here. But in this case, it doesn't make sense. It has to be a verb, right? Mr. Smith dove into the ocean to cool off. Mr. Smith dove into the ocean. Dove isn't a correct way of saying that in that context. You want to have them read contractions as they're printed. So here it says, Mr. Smith does not mind the heat. Doesn't is what it says on the page, so that's incorrect. And it's just marked as one incorrect word because the contraction counts as one word. It was hot at the beach. Mr. Smith doesn't heat the mind. So this is a transposition of the words, the entire words. The words must be read in the order they appear on the page. So those are both errors. Okay, I crossed through all this. I think that's retell stuff. Yep. And here's an example. So you can see here some kind of error on special. It's not noted whether that was an omission or a substitution. Could be helpful to know. Like maybe they said spatial or species. Here they had an error on plastic and then self-corrected. So that does not count as an error. All the words on this line are going to get counted as errors. And here after heat is where they stopped. And they've had an error on firefighters. So if we count that up, 1 error, no more, 2, 3, oops, I don't have to count those. From 40 to 53, that's 13. So 1 plus 13, 14, 15. Let's see if that's how they marked it. 15 errors. How'd they know it was 73 words? Well, this first word starts right after 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73. 73 words minus 15 errors. The student is reading 58 correct words per minute. Well, what does that mean? How do I compare it? Okay, so here are our grade levels at the bottom. We'll look at this again together next week. And we are looking at the beginning of the year. Remember, first grade doesn't offer a beginning of the year benchmark for oral reading fluency. So we look at middle of the year just to look at something. And then here we're looking at words correct. You can focus on that. We can deal with accuracy later. So just look at this row. So you're hoping your second grader is at 52. And let's look at the labels they put on those. Benchmark is the 52, that bolded one. Cut point for risk, problematic, but that's how they call it, is 37. And for second grade at this point, 68 words, correct words per minute is above benchmark, what do you mean by that? Okay, so 70 is what we're looking for per benchmark in third grade, 90 correct words per minute in fourth grade, 111 in fifth grade. Okay. Yeah, I think we can leave that. All right, so you know where to find the materials. You know that you're doing the beginning of the year benchmark 1, except for first grade. If you're in kindergarten, or if you're student teaching in kindergarten, you probably want to practice this with an older student or even a friend. And then if you wanted to try the randomized automatic naming, we can have you do that. Okay, I think I already went over. This is fifth grade benchmark assessment as opposed to progress monitoring. That's why it says benchmark. First of 3 passages on the first fall benchmark. Second of 3, and so on. Whoa, bio break. So the last thing here, okay, 2 last things. Rapid automatized naming and progress monitoring. So if you are, say, working with a 5th grader who can read connected text, but you are fairly confident that there's just going to be no success, or it's not going to give you anything to give them the 5th grade material, you could choose to do progress monitoring. So let's say you'd estimate that the student is reading around a 2nd grade level. You could choose the progress monitoring materials, and that's what progmon means here. And there's progress monitoring here for first sound fluency, phoneme segmentation fluency, and nonsense word fluency. Also maze, which is a comprehension thing. But for the oral reading fluency, there are documents here. Wait for it. Oh, Lord. Okay. So scoring and then student materials. So the idea here is, let's see, we're thinking about 2nd grade. Level 2. Okay, so these are the student materials for that. And we have separate ones because the benchmark, we don't want to keep giving the same benchmark, basically. We want to mix it up so they're not memorizing the assessment. Yeah, so you just have to think about what it means. If the student does really well on a level 2 passage, but they're chronologically in 5th grade, what can we say about their performance? Okay, and then rapid automatized naming, apologies. Here, Acadience, benchmark, okay, it's rapid automatized naming. And there's a manual here. So basically, the gist is you're going to let the student name these items: shoe, sun, cat, chair, tree. If they have different words for these, like sunshine or gatito or broccoli, just tell them, okay, sure, but for this assessment, we're going to call it shoe, sun, cat, chair, tree, 1-syllable words. And I'll let you look at the directions for this if you're going to do it. But the gist is you're trying to see how quickly they can recall the words for these as they go across, to help you know if hesitations they might be having in naming letters or letter sounds could be coming from it taking a little longer for them to name anything versus an issue with their knowledge of letters and letter sounds. Okay. And feel free to ask me questions about that if you are thinking about doing that. Okay. Whew. That's that part. Hopefully it's helpful. Goodbye.